So it has been a while since I've done videos like this on my YouTube channel. I want to make sure that everyone can hear me on this phone. Yes, I got a new iPhone and I'm very new to it, so I'm recording off of it. Let me know if you can hear me okay, because I have the fans and stuff blowing in the background. Also, I don't have the lavalier, so I'm going to do my very best to try to project and get my message across. Now, I will give a disclaimer here. There is a lot to unpack here. I'm going to do my best to not make this video too long, but I do have some stuff that I wanted to share with you, because today is Halloween Eve. It's the night before Halloween, and it is the night before my birthday. I want to use this time right now to reflect over these past couple of months, over these past 12 months, because there have been some things that I went through. I mentioned earlier in my other YouTube channels that I would have a video talking about a situation that I endured this year. So there is some things that I do have to unpack, and I'm going to do my best also to try to speak from the heart. So if I do stutter, I do apologize. It's part of my speech patterns that I have. I'm a neurodivergent, for those that don't know. It's a habit that I have that I'm really trying to work on my speech patterns. And yes, in honor of my birthday for tomorrow, I am celebrating. So yes, I am going to get my buzz on. Admittedly, I know I talked about not drinking, but immediately over the past couple of years, I've been a little bit more open to it, because I learned that it's not too bad as long as you're doing it in moderation. So I'm doing this in moderation. Don't worry, I'm no alcoholic, I promise. I like to have a little bit of buzz here and there, but nothing too excessive. But I digress. And like I said, I'm going to go into more detail into what happened to me early this past year, early within the past couple of months. So as you may or may not have been aware, I made videos when I've actually talked about this too. One of the videos that I talked about in my last couple of vlogs a few years ago is when I underwent a situation. I had mentioned that I had IBS, and I went into detail with that. But this situation right here, this is going to be entirely different. I'm going to ask again that you try to bear with me, and I'm going to do my best to try to be open and transparent. But like I said, early this year, and what prompted me to do this was a situation that happened early this past January. So early in January of this year, I came home from work. I was actually in a very bad mood, and I recall sitting on the couch. I was watching TV and I was eating a snack, and what happened was I had a loose tooth early this year. So I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, this gap right here, I lost a tooth early this year. I went to the dentist because what prompted me to go to the dentist was that loose tooth. So I went to go check that out, and it is important to note that with this situation, I'm going to get that looked at a later time. But going into more detail, I went to this place in Kingston. It's called the Aspen Dental Center. It was the first time in over 5 years since I went to the dentist. And upon going into the dentist, with this situation, also it is important to know that I'm not going to disclose any names of doctors, but I did go see a specialist. And that specialist informed me, they showed me the graph, they did some x-rays and exams. My insurance was able to cover that, but they did some x-rays and exams, and they saw this huge lump underneath the jaw, which I believe was a cyst. They said that it was some type of cyst. I went to another dentist a couple of months later to get a second opinion, but they specified that the first dentist visit that I went to was in Aspen Dental on Ulster Avenue in Kingston. They told me that I had a cyst that needed to be treated right away. I would have to go to a specialist to get the surgery for that. And at first when I got that message, I was a bit startled, because this was the first time that something like this has happened to me. I never had a situation like that happen to me before. So I kept putting it off, mainly because I was scared. So, and it is important to note that during that duration, from January onward to February, I wasn't in pain. I didn't feel any specific pain or nothing like that. Up until beginning around March, around St. Patty's Day, was when I did started to feel some developments going on. That's when I felt some type of like shifting in the mouth, and I did feel some throbbing underneath the right side of my lower jaw. So that's when it progressed, and surely there enough, it went away for a little bit, but then it progressed over time. It came back around April, and it intensified, and then it got to a point where I started feeling a disalignment of teeth, because I wouldn't get this thing treated, mainly because of insurance, because I looked at the bill and I was under the impression that I would have to pay the entire thing, because the current insurance that I have does not cover that type of bill. So I thought that I had to go to the dentist to get the surgery, but it turns out when I went to the other dentist, I went to go get a second opinion, I went to Poughkeepsie, and the other doctor suggested to get that looked at the hospital. So I had to go to the hospital to get this situation treated. I couldn't go to a regular dentist, so I think that's what halted me from getting treatment, mainly because I was scared and because of the funds. I didn't have enough money to pay for the surgery because all the treatments that were listed, the bill that they got me was over $8,000. There's no way I can afford that. So I made a couple of phone calls for hospitals in the area because they said that it was a very big cyst. It was labeled as like a tumor. I thought maybe it would have been cancerous. Thank goodness it wasn't cancerous. But it does fall under the cyst category, and the doctor suggested that I go to one of the hospitals. So one of the hospitals that I called was Vassar. It's New Vance Health, Vassar in Poughkeepsie. I went down there early this year in June to schedule an appointment, and they said that it was definitely a cyst. It's a benign tumor, but it's under the cyst category. It wasn't cancerous or anything like that. So one of the first surgeries that I have was the biopsy surgery. Now, before I go more into detail with that, it is important to note that for this year, 2025, threw me a huge curveball because a couple of hours, it was 24 hours that I went to get my biopsy surgery, I had a recent death in the family. One of my family relatives, I'm not going to disclose any names, but it was my sister-in-law. So she transitioned off this earth early this year, and because of that, you know, it threw me off for a loop here because that was 24 hours before I received that unexpected news. And I said that most of my summer was very difficult because I had to go through that, not only just that, but also going through the process. So I mentioned it was a tough thing for me to experience, going through a loss of a family member. So I went in, I couldn't cancel the procedure. I decided to get this thing done, regardless of the situation that, you know, me and my family went through early this year, losing a loved one in our family. That was very tough for me. And, you know, I'm gonna try to maintain myself and not get too emotional, but I lost a very dear friend of mine. My brother got married a couple of years ago, and my sister-in-law, she died unexpected of a heart attack. So that was a hard thing for me to experience. I won't go into further detail, and I'm not going to disclose any names for respect to their family and also for privacy as well. I'm not going to go more into detail with that. But the day before, I was already mentally preparing for this surgery, and I went and got this surgery. I got the biopsy. Very nice doctors, very good team. I'm not going to disclose the doctor's name, but he was a pretty good guy. He seemed fairly young for his age and very knowledgeable about the subject. So I went into the surgery room at Vassar, and they went over the procedure. You know, they wanted to do a biopsy, and they told me how they were going to put me out, so they were going to give me some general anesthesia. The surgery lasted at least 3 hours. So the initial plan for the biopsy was to take a sample, so they were going to incision the inside of my gum to sample the fluid that was already from the cyst in order to diagnose it, in order to figure out what it was. But what they ended up doing actually was that they took the whole cyst as well as the bottom side of my wisdom tooth and my upper side of the wisdom tooth. I had to get 3 teeth removed altogether. So the top wisdom tooth and the bottom wisdom tooth got removed, as well as the cyst. They took the whole thing and they stitched my mouth. So for a while, I couldn't talk because partial of my jaw was locked. It was like this. So I couldn't talk. So one side of my mouth was able to move. I couldn't move this side because this side was very stiff. They basically locked my mouth, but the stitches were very dissolvable, so I didn't have that issue. So I went home after getting all the general anesthesia. This was early at the beginning of summer, by the way. So the first day of summer, the first week of summer, I went to get my biopsy surgery, so I got all the works done. And then 2 weeks, I had to come back to do a bone graft surgery. I'm gonna go more into detail about that, but during the initial surgery, the biopsy, when I got home, and I will say this and give a disclaimer too, there's gonna be pictures on my screen that shows you the procedure and the type of procedure that I have to have. And also, I will disclose some information that may be somewhat grotesque. So if you don't have if you have a sensitive, I would encourage you not to watch this video because I'm gonna go more into detail about what happened to me during my time in the hospital. So I got home, like I said, from the biopsy, I got home, I went back to my apartment complex here, and I felt something tickling in my throat. I wasn't sure what it was, but I tried to cough it out, and what ended up happening was I ended up puking blood. Yes, I puked out blood, mainly because I think it was, the doctor suggested that maybe I had too much anesthesia, and that's what prompted me to cough out a lot of blood. So I did go through that. 2 weeks later, I come back into the same office at Vassar. I went to the Dyson Center, the Dyson Cancer Center. No, I did not have cancer, thankfully. It was a cyst, but I had to go back in to do a bone graft surgery. Now, this is where things are going to go a little bit intense, and I'm going to go more into detail about something that I went through. The bone graft procedure is basically because they took a part of my, not only was the cyst affecting my tooth, but it was affecting the mandible, part of my jawbone. They had to remove that. I'll have a picture of that on my screen shortly. So the way this goes in the procedure is about the same time. It's about 3 hours. I'm sitting in, the doctor is going over the instructions. I'm being put under general anesthesia. So what they did was, they told me to shave my face. So looks can be deceiving. I look better now, but a couple of months ago was really hard. The recovery process was very difficult. So they told me to shave my face. I had to shave all of my excess hair on my face. And what they did was, the doctor, he incisioned most of the right side, so they had to cut my face open. And then what they did also was, right here where you see this mark, that's the hip incision. I had to have an incision done on my hip. So they took a piece of bone from my hip in order to use that as supporting jawbone, and then they put the titanium plate because the right side was missing a jawbone, because the cyst not only took away my tooth, but also part of my jawbone. The cyst, there are 4 different types of cysts, but the type of cyst that I have was an odontogenic cyst. That cyst was like an egg-like sac that not only ate my tooth, but most of my jaw. So I had to get that removed. Once I got the hip incision done and all the work's done, I was admitted into Vassar for at least 2 nights. So during that duration, it was really tough for me because while I was under heavy anesthesia, I had a hard time getting up because of the hip incision. And what ended up happening was, I tried to go to the bathroom and I ended up missing. I had to go take a number 1. Yes, I had to go urinate. And I couldn't get to the bathroom. I had to have physical therapy help me to get to the bathroom. I did some physical therapy work during that time too. Because of the hip incision, I had to use a walker for at least a week. At the hospital, of course, it was hard for me to eat because they served me breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I wasn't able to really eat because the doctor not only did all of that, but he also put little tiny screws in the gums that act as braces for my teeth. He put rubber bands on it to keep the teeth intact. Once the project was done and they got the skin cut out, they stitched underneath my chin in order to get the bone in place and the titanium plate, which currently now sits on the right side. I've made progress ever since then, but going back to what I said before with the hospital, I was at the hospital and they gave me a variety of different medications. It wasn't too many medications, but one of the medications that the doctor gave me was oxycodone. The oxycodone is usually treated for like severe pain, and it acts as almost like a steroid, so I wasn't on that too much. I was only on it for like 2 days. They gave it to me not only in the pill form, but also they gave me other medications and antibiotics on top of that. So 2 nights I was at the hospital. I came home and I had to use a walker for a week. I couldn't walk around. I had to have physical therapy to help me get around. So I ended up using a walker to get to the bathroom. And surely enough, a week passed and my hip was able to heal. So thankfully that happened, but the whole process, my teeth and my jaw and everything was very locked. So I couldn't move my mouth too much. The nerves and everything was pretty painful, but I was under heavy medications. They also used Novocaine too to numb the pain because they did excess work to my mouth. And the reason why I'm sharing all of this is because over the past summer, it was pretty hard. I wanted to share that because any one of you that has been through a similar situation, let me know. But this was the first time that something like this has happened to me. And I think it's categorized as a denture cyst because denture cysts are usually caused by either accidents or infections. What caused that was the fact that I went years without going to the dentist because we had COVID-19. During the pandemic, offices were closed, and I didn't get a chance to make an appointment to the dentist. So I think that's what caused it. The fact that I went a few years without going to the dentist is what I think caused the infection. And yeah, I wanted to share that. When it comes to the day-to-day activities and eating, because the surgery and the mentality of it, I wasn't really able to move around or get outside that much, mainly because most of my right jaw was locked because I had those metal screws. It made it very hard for me to eat. So I ended up eating soft foods. The doctor suggested eating soft foods temporarily for at least a month or two because everything was just coming together, and the effects of the surgery, I couldn't have any solid foods. I couldn't have any like steak, potato. Well, I was able to eat mashed potatoes, but I couldn't have anything solid. I couldn't have any sandwiches. I couldn't have any snacks. That's what sucked about this whole recovery process. I spent most of my summer recovering. I didn't go anywhere. I ended up eating blended foods, applesauce, yogurt, mashed potatoes, the whole 9 yards. It even got to a point when I was ordering off of DoorDash, because most times I order off of DoorDash, and I ordered restaurant food. And even there were times where I had to take food that I ordered from the restaurant and put it in the blender. That was pretty disgusting, but that was the only way that I can eat food. It got to a point where I was taking pasta, chicken wraps, Chinese food. I blended that up together. I'm not going to show no pictures. Don't worry. It's very grotesque. I'm not going to show any of that. But that's what I had to live off of for the past couple of months. And I sat on the couch watching TV. I wasn't very productive because of the surgery, the effects that surgery had on me, not physically but mentally. The nerves were too much. I couldn't move my mouth. My mouth felt very stiff. I kept making multiple calls to the doctor and feeling like this was never going to heal. But thankfully, the months have passed, and I recently went to speech therapy. I was there for at least 3 sessions. I went to Northern Dutchess up here across the river, and we did some speech therapy. And it was suggested for me to do some stretches and exercises in order to move the nerves. And one of my speech therapists suggested that because I don't move my mouth, the nerves are going to feel very tight. So the trick of it is I had to move my mouth. It felt like something else was happening. I wasn't understanding why I was under this much pain, mainly because I wasn't moving my mouth. I wasn't utilizing the nerves. So the doctor or the therapist suggested that I stretch out my muscles, do some chin massages, maybe do some neck stretches. And surely enough though too, and also I was prescribed medications for it. I was prescribed different antibiotics. Within the duration from June up until now, I was under different medications and antibiotics. One of the medications and antibiotics that I was prescribed by the doctor was this mouthwash called chlorhexidine. Chlorhexidine is a mouthwash that you use in order to kill bacteria, but you also have to be careful and use that under moderation, because if you use it too much, that could also stain your teeth. But it's a good use for any significant pain within your teeth or gums. You can use that too to wash it in order to kill bacteria. I was also prescribed another medication called gabapentin, which is 100 milligrams. The purpose of that drug is to treat any leftover pinches, because after months of surgery and the recovery process, I was feeling like pins and needles. It felt like the strings were in between my chin, but I realized over time that it was nerves. So I had to move my mouth. I couldn't move my mouth. It felt like I was stuck. And that prohibited me to pursue my day-to-day activities. There were times where I had to call out of work because I work in retail, and part of my job requires that I interact with people. And it was a struggle for me because I couldn't move my mouth. So there were multiple times where I had to call out because I was either in pain or my jaw felt stiff. The doctor early in July, he removed the screws, the tiny little screws off my mouth because I was making progress. But even during that duration, from July onward all through August and part of September, I was still healing. It felt like there was movement in my mouth. The teeth felt displaced. And yeah, that was a pretty hard process to go through. So I felt that I needed to share that as like a testimony, because that was something that I had to endure early this year. The difficulty of going through a situation like that, because it's one thing to go to the dentist and get your teeth checked. It's one thing to be told that you have a virus or some type of infection, that has to get surgically removed. And mind you, I've never went through an oral surgeon before. I never had to have anything done like this. The type of surgery that I had to have for this situation was an oral maxillofacial surgery, because this thing was so big, I couldn't go to a regular dentist. I had to go to a big hospital for this. So once again, looking back over the past 4 months, it was a really hard summer because of enduring a situation like that. It was a medical condition that I had to get treated, because looking back, if I wouldn't have made that decision to get this checked sooner, if I would have put this off for a number of months going into the next year, what would have resulted from that was that I would have had a huge lump in my face. And that would be very serious, because then I would lose the ability to not only talk, but also I have to deal with that huge lump on my face. So thankfully I was able to get all of that treated, but it was a really sucky summer because I felt like I missed out on a lot. I felt like I didn't really get outside. I didn't really do too much. So I had to use this time to reflect over this past year. 35 was kind of a fluke, I'm not gonna lie. Things didn't really go exactly the way that I had hoped, but I also took that as a lesson for me to learn, because that was a very intense situation that I had to deal with looking over this past 35th year. And so now, during the eve of my birthday, we're now going into the next chapter. So one of the things that I will do, that I will strive to do to try to better myself, but right now my main intent is to focus on my overall well-being, because I feel like that's more important. All the materials and everything that's secondary, that's not important. What's more important is that I made it to see another year, because it's not every day that most people like me, especially neurodivergents, don't get the chance to get this far in their life. I mean, 36 is a milestone. Can you imagine I made it all this time, 36 years? That's a lot to live. If you were to ask me, what are my plans for this next upcoming year, because I'm closing an old chapter and opening a new one of the questions that I get asked is, what are your plans for this next year? And I think mostly I would say that my overall plan for next year is to continue to work on myself, continue to work on my well-being, and to try to challenge myself to do things out of the ordinary. I'm not going to make any big plans. I'm just going to go by day, because I'm not going to lie. Working a job and dealing with people has been very exhausting. I've been experiencing a lot of burnout, and I've been emotionally drained. So if you wonder why I haven't been making a whole lot of content on this page right here, is because of the situation that I endured early this year with the surgery, and also feeling mentally drained from working. Because when you experience burnout, like most people do, in this economy and the way things are in the state of the world, it's a lot of burnout. But I hope that next year I can continue just working on one specific goal, an aspect of myself that maybe hopefully I can change. Just being realistic, I'm not going to really do too much. I'm just going to work one small goal at a time. Maybe try to improve my fitness, and to try to be a little bit more proactive when it comes to content creation, whether it be on this page or on my other page. The other page is where I share all of my adventures. This page is mainly used for like creativity when it comes to karaoke or dancing or any of those type of videos. So I will do my best to strive to create more content like this. Not for monetization yet, because I'm not sure if I'm ready for that aspect yet, because I do these videos mainly out of my free will. These are not done for money. So I know a lot of these videos do not get a lot of viewership. I do this solely for fun, but that might be an option that I may explore in the future. I just have to see how things go. I'm being realistic about my situation, because I'm not going to make a big jump just at it yet. I'm going to focus on an aspect of myself to change and to try to stay a little bit more fit. It is important to know too, during that surgery I lost a little bit of weight, but as you've noticed, I did gain a few pounds because I was able to stay in shape. You notice that my physique is a little different now compared to the pictures that I showed you. I lost a lot of weight I lost weight a couple of months ago. I lost maybe about 10-15 pounds, but that was due to the surgery. It wasn't due to IBS or any of those things that I may have mentioned in my past vlogs. This had more to do with my oral surgery. So for those of you that are watching this or are not familiar with what I went through this year, if you are someone that is going through a similar situation that I went through early this year, I hope that this video does inspire you to get through this. I had some really good team. I had really good doctors and a very good team. They seemed very knowledgeable about what they did, and I'm thankful that they were able to fix my problem. So I just had to share that. But I'm gonna stop rambling because I know I do a whole lot of rambling. Also important to note too, if you notice in my past couple of YouTube videos that I made a couple months ago, you notice that I don't do a whole lot of talking. The objective and the reason for this is because a lot of my videos, I do a whole lot of rambling. You hear me talk a lot. So my main goal is to not do a whole lot of talking and just let the action do the talking for me. That's why I've been making a lot of my step dance snippets. If you notice, I've been going back into step dancing, the stepping videos. I don't do a whole lot of talking because I'm a firm believer of letting the action do the talking for me and not doing the rambling. So I just figure I share that. But I'm gonna conclude this video in stating that I hope you guys have a good night. Be safe for those of you that have kids. If you're planning on going trick-or-treating, just be safe. And thank you to those few that do take the time to watch my video vlogs. I know there's not a whole lot of you, but I thank you for wishing me a happy birthday. For those that took the time to wish me a happy birthday, I'm turning 36. Yes, that is a big milestone because believe it or not, it's so hard to fathom that I'm actually a little closer now to 40 than I am 30. Can you imagine? I never would have pictured myself to be this age. 36, that's a milestone. I just had to say that. Thank you to those again for taking the time to watch my videos. I know this video was very lengthy, but this was just my way of expressing myself to the best of my ability, the way I know how to express myself. I didn't write any of this down. I just had to point that out. So I hope you guys have a good night. I'm going to conclude this video. And be sure to stay tuned for my next video, my other page. I'm going to have a vlog up tomorrow. So be sure to look out for that. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for praying for me, for those very few that took the time. If you watched this video and you've prayed for me, I appreciate that. And thank you so much again, and I hope you guys have a good night.